the whole thing, but that clip that circulated around, like the big thing that the abundance people were feasting on was that they felt that my response to housing issues in New York City was inadequate or wrong. The issue is not whether we have a solution, a single solution for the housing crisis here. The issue is that a movement that at least one of the two co-authors has said is a bid to have a war within the Democratic Party, to define the Democratic Party. That's what Derek said on the Lex Friedman podcast, something to that effect. Oh, you got it. Yeah. Go down to the actual quote right there. On the Democratic side, there is a fight. It's happening right now. And our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party. So I'm not of the left. I'm certainly not of the far left, but I do not begrudge the left for fighting because there's a fight to be had. Okay, so this isn't just about housing policy in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. And then while you're at it, find that Nickerson thing. Okay, so this is the Niskanen Center. And to the liberal side of the Cato Institute, Niskanen left the Cato Institute to set up his own center because they had some libertarian differences. But the abundance faction will enter the battle for the future of the Democratic Party by initially organizing 3 core groups. Now, even before this, in the same piece, the writer said, we have a choice. Do we do like a third movement, or do we try and take over a party? The Republican Party is too far gone. We can't do it. We're going to try for the Democratic one. And then they organize, then they say, this is how we would do it. Intellectuals and activists motivated by a different set of issues than those that have animated our politics over the past 50 years. Segment of business alienated from radicalized Republican Party, socially moderate and economically activist, growth-oriented voters. Okay.
So the exact voters that Kamala Harris tried to covet in the 2024 election and lost?
Part of the problem, there's 2 things here, in my mind, about this that is problematic. One is it is unclear whose set of policies we're adopting and where they're going to take them. There's $120 million that were dumped into us by the Open AI...
Open Philanthropy, which is part of the benevolent, what was it called? The effective altruism. The effective altruism movement. Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
Yes.
Who's about to go to jail.
$120 million. And you saw why Elon Musk, sort of like highlighted Ezra Klein's conversation with Jon Stewart. Now, it turned out that segment was the wrong segment to highlight because the people who were actually involved in the decision-making around the BEAD plan, which was about a rural broadband, or extending broadband, I should say, said he's got the whole story wrong. He didn't do any reporting on it. He's just talking out of his ass.
And wrong in a way that is kind of predictable given the sort of... Yeah.
And look, I also have a buddy who literally in the business of going around nationally and extending broadband. And there's a concession like government could own the pipes. We could pay for it.
In some municipalities they do.
And it's going to be inefficient. Same with government housing on some level is going to be inefficient because almost definitionally, that's why it's done. Like it's super inefficient to have a postal service.
Yep.
It is, if you're looking for efficiency, sending a letter and making it possible that if you live on the side of a mountain that you have mail service, I'm sorry, that's inefficient. But it was deemed important for us as a society to do it, even though it was definitionally inefficient. It is the case that to put in a filter to prevent your inhabitants from getting asthma if a building is located next to a highway, that's inefficient. It's inefficient. But as a society, we make a decision. Just because we're giving, housing or providing public housing doesn't mean that people living there should be more subject to getting asthma or dying of mesothelioma or whatever. That's inefficient. That is inefficient. And so it's really the problem with the abundance agenda is that as on a top line, it elides the idea of a political economy, that we are making policy decisions. And it elides the fact that these policy decisions are made largely by people who profit off of scarcity or profit off of the commodification of these things that some of us in society believe should not be so commodified. Housing was, up until like 25 years ago, not a particularly great investment. It was okay. I mean, if you're going to hold on to it for 50 years and you're going to live there, and then, it was a way of building wealth, just like like if you put your money in a bank account at 3 or 4% for 50 years, you will accrue wealth as well. But the beauty of a house is you get to live in it. But then it became a way of making money. And it has become such a valuable asset and one which people rely on to grow, that immediately the idea of more housing becomes a threat to your financial stability down the road.
But even if there's more housing, say, right? Like, can we just, this open philanthropy thing, 120 million to support YIMBY reforms. These are the effective altruists, but meaning crypto and AI people, right? There's also a huge section of this industry that believes in this concept called the network state, which is the privatization of our cities. It's very possible that YIMBY reforms, yes, in my backyard, and I think that's being co-opted by the abundance people. I am a YIMBY person in the sense that living near public housing, that's a YIMBY thing too, but that's not really as much a focus of the book. Could it be that this vision that they're putting forward that has these financial backers who are in the same industry as the people that think private cities are the future, that could have some sort of connection, especially when the focus is about unleashing the private sector to make more money? Yeah, I'm very concerned about that.
But the idea of a Democratic Party that does not center the fact that our power dynamics in society are defined by money, and therefore wealth inequality and the concentration of wealth is problematic, because that's what it is. Like, right? Like, if this was a book that was like how to create housing, increase housing supply, as opposed to abundance, which is stretching over from government funding of science to local housing regulations and environmental regulations. Like, now, it may be that they had to cram it all into a book. I mean, like who knows? But that's their problem. That's not our problem. And maybe it's not their fault that their whole rubric was adopted by libertarians and there were, $100 million dumped into it. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Like, the idea of the abundance agenda, which is an incredibly amorphous thing, but when it's written down by the people who are actually backing it with money, perceive it as a deregulatory agenda. And that being the center or the sort of defining element of the Democratic Party.
Everything bagel liberalism.
Problematic. Yeah, like the idea that because understand too, when I build a home and I build union density, and I build a home and I make sure that it's built in such a way that people who have been on the outside of political power, who have been sort of systemically put into housing that's not going to build intergenerational wealth or is going to create, higher rates of cancer, higher rates of asthma, whatever it is. When I avoid doing that and actually do the opposite, I'm strengthening society. In addition to like not having problems down the road with higher asthma rates or whatnot, strengthening important elements of society, democracy. I'm empowering people who have not been empowered. And if the argument is like we have too much of an emergency right now, we need to build housing and it's an emergency, well, we have models for emergency measures. But the case has to be made that the emergency is real and that that everyone is going to feel the brunt of an emergency situation. I mean, that's why, like, the example of Shapiro. Yes, of course, it's an emergency, but like, who is having to pay the price for that emergency? As far as I can tell with that bridge, it's like not many people.
It's a pretty convenient example. Also, just saying that Josh Shapiro has been, as soon as the book came out, said he's all aboard the abundance agenda. But we're talking about as a political agenda going forward, and he's going to run for president in 2028.
Yeah,
so
I want to play this clip. This is sort of fascinating. Okay. This is I would recommend people actually watch this clip because it's actually, there are parts of it where it's like where Ezra and Larry Summers is actually in this too, are really engaging with Slack. David Sack. What is his name?
Sacks.
I can't even remember.
Who, by the way, was
Slacks.
just doing I coincidentally have this written down, was just at Trump's $1.5 million per plate crypto fundraiser in early May.
And
I don't want my political leaders on the Democratic side in bed with these guys.
What's the name of the other guy? The
Chamath Palihapitiya.
Yeah, Chamath. Oh, do we have the original video so that we can play that? The original video of this guy on Schultz, Chamath Palihapitiya. He's on the comedian Schultz's podcast, and this went around. And in fact, one of the comedians on there said had a great response to it. But this guy's on Schultz's podcast, and he is complaining about the Biden administration. It was a sort of fascinating exchange. And I guess on some level, it's a bit of a Rorschach. Do we have it? I didn't think it was a Rorschach, but apparently it is. Can we put that up there?
This is one thing I'll tell you about the Trump administration, which is totally different. Okay, I was a lifelong Democrat. Okay, I was a mega donor to the Democrats. Like dinner with Obama level donor. Okay, I couldn't get a fucking phone call returned from the White House to save my life. The only thing that happened to me was I made an off-color comment about like something in China. And I had the Biden administration basically say something, essentially put out a press release, basically saying I was mean. That's all I got for millions of dollars. That, you know what I mean?
For being honest.
Okay, that's all I got for millions of dollars. And he goes on to say, but with the Trump administration, I got a call back from them, and and I helped somebody with the tariffs or something. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment. For millions of dollars, that's all I got. What is the problem with what's been said there? The Biden administration wouldn't return my phone call. Trump administration picks up the phone immediately.
Because Biden was woke for China.
No, but I want people to really think about what is the first critique you have of what that guy is saying. In my mind, the critique, and in fact, one of the comedians said it afterwards, don't you think there's a problem that you think just by virtue of the amount of money that you give, that you deserve this type of access? Now, I understand it's simplistic. It's a simplistic view of politics maybe that I have, or what, that are not terribly savvy about this.
Not very granular.
But it's like, my first reaction to that critique is this is how entitled these people are. Remind you, he does not say, I'm a scientist, or I have brilliant ideas, or I'm a titan of industry. He cites the amount of money he gives to the Biden administration, and that's why he's pissed he doesn't get a phone call back. And he even said, again, I even gave less to Trump, and I still got calls back. So the critique in my mind is we've got a systemic problem with money, because in the instance of the Trump administration and obviously in the Obama administration, like, this money buys you access, and it necessarily is squeezing other people out. And this, of course, happens on every level of government. And I'm aware that I wasn't surprised. I was surprised the guy was so open about it and completely lacking the self-awareness to realize, like, oh, this makes me sound like an entitled prick.
And later in the clip, the reaction from the rest of the guys on the podcast was like, oh, really? Like, you admitted this publicly?
To normal people, the problem with this is money should not be the determining factor as to how you're listened to by a politician. It's fine if you represent 0.1% of the population based on your money, and you give this money, like, you should get 0.1% of like the messaging from or ability to sort of like access the president. And Ezra goes in on him on this, but the critique, he can't close the circle, because in the end, he realizes he's not critiquing money. He does not want to critique that this guy's Chamath, or whatever the guy's name is, that his access is a function of money. That is not the critique.
Where you're allied now. But before I came on the show, I had gone on X and I saw a clip of you going around where you're saying that one of the problems with the Biden administration was that you couldn't get anybody on the phone. And in the Trump administration, you make the call, the deputy chief of staff picks up, you say, hey, I need you to talk to this company. I work with them. They're
pause
freaking
it
out about
again.
the tariff.
You just saw it. The key is not just you couldn't get anybody on the phone. It was like, I gave all this money to Biden. And I was a mega donor, and I did not get a call back. That's the key part here. But Ezra focuses on a different part. Go.
Couldn't get anybody on the phone. And in the Trump administration, you make the call, the deputy chief of staff picks up, you say, hey, I need you to talk to this company. I work with them. They're freaking out about the tariffs. The deputy chief of staff calls the company. They work something out.
No, not that they work something out. They listen.
They listen. This world in which we are doing the deal making by individual relationships, by who can get their calls answered, not by rules that feel clear and stable.
That's how the Biden. No, but that's how the Biden administration worked, Ezra.
That's not what Chamath said.
And that's not what I said.
Well, Chamath,
Ezra, you're trying to make it sound like corruption.
Hold on.
Ezra and Biden, it was George Clooney that was making the call. Who cares what George Clooney thinks?
Didn't you just say on? Well, I was very, very critical of Biden.
No, I saw that clip, Ezra, and what Chamath said. Hold on. What Chamath said is simply that the White House listens when he calls, whereas he couldn't get his calls returned by the Obama administration.
Great. I think we're actually not saying something all that different here.
You made it sound like corruption.
I actually do think what Trump is working through is deal by deal patronage based on how he sees the company. The other country.
That's not what happened. Ezra, can I just make sure that this is clear to you? This is a 150-year-old American business. I have no interest in that company except a friendship. These are Americans hiring Americans.
So there it is. Like, and he goes on in this to talk about his expertise and knocking the Biden. But his first claim in that video was, I was a mega donor. I gave even more money to the Bidens. And Ezra does not go on to tackle the obvious problem, which is, hey, wait a second. Even if you didn't get special treatment, it was for a friend and it wasn't to, why do you get to promote your friend's 150-year-old business while this guy over here doesn't get to promote his friend's 150-year-old business?
Why would you just give that business a seat in Congress?
Like, Ezra is accurately saying Trump is just, doing what is in his personal interests at any given time. But The reason why Biden looks better in that is not because he's not going out, he's not negotiating this way, is that it's less access just based upon money. The problem with, if Donald Trump had friends who, worked at Walmart and were like, hey, they're cutting my hours back because prices are raising and tariffs. And he said, let me consider that. No, it's that the people who have access have done so because they have paid for access because they can pay for access. That is the dynamic that just seems to be completely absent from his analysis as to why government isn't functioning in the way that it's supposed to. That moneyed interests find ways of making sure that government does not cut into their economic interests, personal interests, whatever it is.
It would have been a good follow-up to ask why he donated to Joe Biden then and what his expectation was as well.
I found that fascinating.
It's kind of a side point, but feels related. The reason he says that Biden put out this press release, like condemning comments that he had made, Palpatia, and it was actually because he said no one cares about human rights violations in China. Against the Uyghurs. That was the press release the Biden administration put out saying, despite the fact that he donated all this money to them, he made this sort of like flagrant, offensive comments about human rights. And clearly the Trump administration.
Yeah, and who knows? Had he not said that, Biden may have answered his phone too. I would imagine he would have, because that is problematic. Now, I know it is completely naive to think that's not happening. And of course, I know that's happening. That is my critique, is that we've empowered, we have created such a uber class of wealth. We have created such a disparity in wealth in this country that we have moved from a plutonomy into a plutocracy. And that doesn't mean that there isn't room for regulatory reform on a, like in specific perspectives in which is inhibiting housing. But if you ignore, I'm sorry, the deregulation in those instances without a proper critique of the structural problems seems to me to be very dangerous, because all it ends up doing at the end of the day is creating more wealth disparity.
Do you think that Ezra has a problem, or would draw the affordability crisis and the fact that income and wealth inequality is at like the most extreme levels that we've been at since, I don't know, pre-Great Depression, that he would draw some sort of correlation with Citizens United and the unleashing of dark money in our politics? Because if I just sent this screenshot from the Brennan Center, even since 2018, look at the amount of dark money that has gone super PAC funding from dark money affiliates since 2018. This is just secret money, let alone the amount. What?
I was just going to say, was the Dakota Access Pipeline when the Army Corps of Engineers overran a whole bunch of regulation stuff? It's stupid to think that we can't do things, but who gets to do it is about power, right? Like oil companies. But was that abundance agenda?
Yeah, this is the story of American politics since 2018, basically. I mean, I don't know. I would have to find numbers on total spending. I'm doing this on the fly, but that's just dark money affiliates going into super PACs. And what do you know? We're at these, the interests of the wealthy have been taken care of. And there you go. Funding for political campaigns just continuing to increase over the years. I don't have the exact data in front of me, but I know that that's the case. And so the point is that this is campaign finance reform is a major problem. These groups aren't just spending money for the hell of it. That Palpatia isn't giving money to Joe Biden because he expects nothing in return. Elon Musk isn't breaking records in Wisconsin in terms of spending on the judiciary race because he expects nothing in return. The reason that there's this increase in spending is because this works. And when it works, what does that mean? It means that government doesn't function for regular people. It functions for special interests.
Again, like, this is not, I don't even need to, and I probably in the course of the debate probably should not have been even engaged in it. The question of whether there are local regulations that make it harder to build, and that's the key blockage to the building of new buildings in this city or that city. But at the very least, Klein did not correct his co-author when he said there's a fight. And our book is trying to win a certain intra-left coalitional fight about defining the future of liberalism in the Democratic Party. I mean, I didn't say that. They said that. And there's, again, at least $120 million behind this project. That doesn't even count what's at the Niskanen Center and what's being dumped in by, I don't know, Elon Musk, retweeting Ezra and somehow, an account with 1,000 followers putting a clip from the Ezra thing getting 4 million views. There's a lot of juice behind this thing. And it is, like they say, about an intra-left coalitional fight. And I do not think that the fight should be won by people who think that the problem with wealth inequality and the centering of oligarchy and money in politics is the fundamental, to the extent that there is a fundamental problem in our politics, that's not the fundamental problem.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like a little bit less regulation is what we really need to build. Never mind from a political standpoint. I'm sorry. That is a losing political agenda. Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.